computer. Okay, hello everyone. Hello Michele. Good to have you on the podcast.
It's great to be here.
So Michele, you help content marketers establish themselves as thought leaders in their industries. Can you tell us more about that? Just give us a bit kind of after that, give us like a short snippet about yourself.
I'm sorry, short snippet of what?
Oh, about yourself, about your work.
Yeah, perfect. So I've been in the content marketing space probably since 2008, before it was even called content marketing, but that's the type of work I was doing for clients. And so I've been helping marketers try to establish themselves as thought leaders, authorities in their brands since then. And most recently, since about 2018-ish, I've been focused specifically on helping marketers conduct survey-based research.
Right.
So that they can then publish these big benchmark reports and, produce something that's actually net new and meaningful and get their name out there. So they can really be seen as authorities and doing something that other brands aren't.
All right, sounds good. What does your name mean? Do you know what Michele means?
I feel like I did at one point, but I can't recall.
Do you want us to check it out now?
We can certainly, I can Google that.
Okay.
I know that the typical spelling of Michele is with 2 L's, but mine's with 1. And it's, according to a quick Google, it says who resembles God, which just seems a little ostentatious or something.
Right.
Yeah, I'm like, huh.
All right, that's
Okay.
interesting.
But that's what Google says.
Right. Okay, so I'm gonna get to the research bits a bit later in the episode, but I'm gonna just ask you now a series of questions that I usually ask people, and if you feel like you can answer anything related to your personal life or professional life, anything goes basically.
Perfect.
So one of my favorite questions is, tell me something you changed your mind about.
So recently or just at all? At all?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like one of the things I used to believe is that if you try hard enough, you can do all the things. And I feel like I've really realized that you can't do all the things all at once, and that you really have to be very thoughtful of what you really want to prioritize in your life. And I think that you need to, realize that, many people's lives have seasons for doing different things. Right. And to really just respect where you are and to prioritize what you can do the most, and to give yourself grace and not realize that you have to do everything.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so tell me something you looked for, but either couldn't find, or you found, but it took you a bit of some time to find it.
That is a really good question. Something that I have been looking for. I think for me, it took me a long time to figure out what it is that I wanted to do. I was one of those people. I have a sister who's a doctor and a sister who is an engineer, and they always knew like this is what they wanted to do. And my path to figuring out what I wanted to do was a lot more circuitous, and I took a lot of different routes. So I left college and I was doing technical writing. I knew I didn't want to do that, but I knew I could get work doing that. So it's been kind of fun to find my own path. First I found marketing, then I found content marketing. Now I found original research. So I think it's been fun to figure out what works for me and create that life based on just experimentation and things like that. It wasn't just this straight path where I could just plug myself into it.
Right. And would you say now this is actually the way I see career progression, is that you keep experimenting to see what fits you more. But do you say that, would you say that now you finally reached the point where you know what fits you as opposed to before, or is it just like a going on journey?
Quite frankly, it's a constant evolution.
Right.
To your point, I think that I see all these different ways that I want to evolve my business. You know, I would love to not only help clients, but actually do a lot more teaching and coaching people on how to do this. Because a lot of the stuff I came up with, I just kind of developed on my own. I mean, obviously tons of influences, and I'm 47 right now. So, I mean, I would love to do this for the next 5-10 years, but I have no idea what life holds. So to your point, it's definitely an evolution, but I think I found peace with what I'm doing right now.
Okay, right. Before I ask the next question, I'm just going to make sure that this noise canceling thing is working. Yep, working. Okay. Tell me something that you think is underrated or you're surprised that not too many people know about.
Again, in terms of marketing or in terms of life in general?
Anything that comes to your mind.
I think quiet is underrated. I think I know a lot of people talk about no distractions or unplugging and things like that, but I think just true quiet, you know, going for a walk and not listening to a podcast or just sitting at home and just literally sitting in silence, I think that is completely underrated. And I think it's almost a skill we have to learn how to do because it feels uncomfortable at first.
Right. Something that comes to mind is there's a Julia Roberts movie, Eat, Pray, and Love. There's an expression, Italian expression that she uses that means the joy of doing nothing. So I think this is where you're kind of like aiming at, is that there's value in just being still and having no external stimuli. Yes.
And I see it maybe because I have 2 kids. I especially see it with my kids. Like, they don't know how to be quiet. They don't know, like, even if they're quiet, they want to listen to music, or, you know what I mean? So it kind of concerns me that they just can't like be. And there is like definitely that serendipity and that joy in finding what quiet brings. But I think it's also just good for the human soul and good for your psyche just to have quiet.
Right. Have you read, I think her name is Susan Cain, her book about quiet, the power of introverts or something like that?
I've heard of it, but I haven't read it.
Okay, right.
And I am an introvert, so I do like quiet. To me, that's how I'm programmed. But even sometimes I just have a hard time like not replacing one noise with another noise. It's just actually just, you know, chopping vegetables or taking a walk and just having pure silence. It's hard sometimes.
Yeah. Okay, so so if you can facilitate a conversation between any 2 people in the world, who would you choose and what would you ask them?
That is also a really good question. I think that I don't even know if I would want to, I mean, this is more on a personal level, but my husband's dad passed away before my kids were born and before he and I met. So I would love to facilitate a conversation between, especially my youngest daughter and her grandpa that she's never met. I don't even know if I would facilitate the conversation so much, but I would my daughter's always asking questions and wants to hear the stories. And, you know, my husband talks so highly of his dad. I would just love to see that connection and that joy with both of them, and just see that take place. That would make me exceedingly happy.
That is very interesting. I'll tell you why, because I also didn't see my grandfather, and my cousin was telling me he saw him, but it was just like for a few months, so he can't remember. Remember. So he was telling me that he was looking for a video footage. He was curious about how he sounds, like the voice. So so he's looking for like a video footage. And at that time, it wasn't very common. So right now in the family, we were doing some kind of like my uncle remembers that he saw a video footage of him sometime in London in the 1990s. I don't know, something. We're doing some really kind of Sherlock Holmes type of thing so that we can retrace back this video footage. So I'm interested, does he have video footage? Has your daughter seen any kind of that type of thing?
No, she's only seen pictures. And so we don't have, I mean, and if we do have video, I think it's probably on those formats that aren't available now to plug them into. So we'd have to go through some service to, you know, convert the whatever type of tapes or whatever type of film to current technology, which we have never done. But now that we're talking, I think my husband has stuff like that in our basement. And I would love to see if he can take it and create it into something. Because he died in 1992. So I've never seen, I've never seen, you know, him live, if you will. So that'd be, I think we would love that so much.
That is so interesting. My grandpa died in 1990, so it's very kind of, I don't know. Hopefully you can, if you end up seeing it, just send me a message, and if I end up seeing it, I'll send you a message just to check on each other.
I definitely will. Yeah, sure. It's like, because now you just imagine how it is, but yeah, I could be totally wrong.
Yeah. Okay, so pick someone this is a bit complicated, but something you learned recently about someone you knew for a while.
This one's on the tip of my tongue. I feel like I just had this conversation that I was like, I never knew that. And I can't remember what it was. Can we pause and come back to this one?
Yes, sure.
Okay.
Sure. All right, so let's now move a bit to the research domain and ask some questions on that. So you specialize in survey research. So what kind of, I'm assuming that some clients come with questions that are not best served by survey research. So do you have like a way to deal with these requests? Do you outsource it? Do you collaborate with other type of researchers? What's your process?
Yeah, so there's a few different scenarios where clients come to me. One, they have a very formed view of what it is they want to study, and they have some ideas of things they want to learn, and they're very open to figuring out how to get those answers. Two, I also have clients who come to me and they know what they want to study. And then when we talk about actual when we actually talk about the survey questions, I sometimes have clients who want to create questions that are very, like, they want to use words that only they use in their company, or, it's like very inside baseball language, or they want to, ask questions in a way that are very convoluted. So sometimes it's a lot of conversations with them about, this is why we ask the question this way. Like, just because you're thinking deeply about this topic doesn't mean that chances are other people are not thinking this deeply, or they aren't using these words that you use, and so forth. So it's really kind of flipping their thoughts and putting them in the mind of a survey taker. I know when I take surveys, if you take surveys, you don't want complicated wording. You just want to keep things really simple. And I would say there's a third group of people who really, they have all these questions they want to ask that are very nuanced or very deep. And quite frankly, in a lot of those times, survey-based research isn't the right way to answer those questions. So in those cases, oftentimes their best solution is to do a set of qualitative interviews, create this discussion guide, do interviews with different people in their field, ask meaningful, thoughtful follow-up questions, and then look across those interviews and figure out what are those trends, what are the insights, and so forth. So, I just had a conversation this week with one of my potential clients, and they wanted to go the survey route, but by the end of the conversation, I had convinced them to go the qualitative route, and then I referred them out to some people I know who do that work really well. So it just depends. I just want people. Surveys are not the best for all circumstances, and I want to make sure if you're going down that path, you're really going to find success and excitement and joy from doing that.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So let's talk a bit about corporate research versus academic research. How do you briefly, like, how do you see the difference between them? And more importantly, do you feel that you have not a preference? I guess I'll tell you my kind of
Yeah.
situation, and then tell me if you're experiencing something like that. Sometimes I feel like I have this kind of calling towards academic research because the mindset fits me a bit more. So I'm
Okay.
wondering if you have kind of like conflicting kind of pulls between academic and corporate research.
Yeah, I mean, to me, academic research, honestly, is a lot. It's probably a lot. I'm an academic researcher, so I'm just going to
Okay.
throw that out there.
Yeah.
So where I specialize is really finding, obviously quality, credible data and finding really interesting stories that you can then go and you can use for your thought leadership and content marketing. To me, academic research is more rigorous and it serves a different goal. So, and I'm not saying that what I do isn't rigorous or isn't credible at all, but I think that they serve very different purposes. Like I kind of think like even like healthcare research, like you have to be very specific and you have to be very methodical, and or even market research where you're trying to really figure out what is the market doing and what's going to happen next and all of these different things. So I think that there's I think you're looking for rigor and you're looking for those data insights that are going to tell you where the market's moving. So you have to make sure that you have a very precise sample and all of those things. But with content marketing research, if you're going after the audience, if you're surveying the audience that's most meaningful to you and you're asking them questions and you're giving people really valuable insight of where they are now, I think that that's useful, but they serve different purposes, and I think they have different level of rigor.
Right.
What are your thoughts? I'm actually curious. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think in my situation, what's pulling me a bit towards the academic route is that I think the beginning point with corporate research, sometimes a lot of time it's like we have a goal and we want to present research that fits that goal. And this is not really kind of how my brain sometimes works. It's like, okay, let's see what's available. This is how my brain works. Let's see what does the evidence say, and then let's draw conclusions. Does that make sense?
It does. And I will say, I think that you're right, because I have talked to marketers, like let's say you're in marketing automation and they want to conduct research to prove that there's value in marketing automation. And to me, that feels very yucky. It feels very, I don't think it's very credible. I don't think it's very, I mean, the punchline's too obvious.
Right.
So I don't like doing research like that at all. I think it's just, again, it feels yucky to me. But right. I think that if let's say I was working with that marketing automation company, I would say, well, what are those questions that your audience truly has and that you want to, explore with curiosity, and let's see what those answers are. They may or they may not be what you expect. They may or may not look great for your particular brand, but let's whatever that is, let's be very curious about that, and let's try to help all the people that you're trying to serve and educate and help. So because I hear what you're saying. Like I do
right.
think it doesn't make any sense to do research that's just going to prove what you believe, because that's just
right.
I think that's stupid. But
to be clear, I think the academia also suffers from this problem. Like there's a lot of it's not that academics they just go with the evidence. Lots of time there's you're trying to prove you have kind of worldview commitments, or the academia is mixed with other politics that also doesn't make. I mean, I'm talking about the ideal.
yes.
But yeah. There's
so they might suffer from the same problem. I mean, honestly.
Yeah, but at least in ideally, or maybe there's different levels of how bad the problem is. There's an expression that I love that I came across. that evidence-based policy making is often turned into policy-based evidence making. So yeah, that's what kind of makes me feel yucky, to borrow your term. Yeah.
Yes. And I think I mean, like, I was reading something, I think it was from Pew Research. And I was like, you know, you could, if you believe this, you could take this data and turn it into this. And if you believe this, you could focus on this part of the research and turn it into this. So I think, you know, I'm stating the obvious, but I think that people oftentimes either only take the data that backs up what they believe, or they look at the data with their own lens that they, you know, preconceived notions and so forth, and it means something. So I think, I don't know, I feel like data in the last few years has just gotten increasingly convoluted.
Right.
And even though I love the work I do, like I have a love-hate relationship with data, to be honest, because I just think people just take it for what they, how they want to use it, and they manipulate it for their purposes.
Right. This is exactly the best word I would use, love-hate relationship. And sometimes I'm like, I want to use numbers, and because I think, you know, obviously math is important and all of that stuff, but sometimes like I want to get away as much as possible away from it, because I know how easily it can be used to misguide people or give a wrong impression of things. So yeah.
But can I add one thing to that, though? The one thing I do think is interesting, though, at least when I work on client projects, again, I work with marketers and community managers and people like that. I think it's so interesting, though, whatever the data is, I can tell that people's wheels are always, it's helping people think differently. No matter what that number says. And I think putting that research together and looking at the findings and publishing those findings, like, people are thinking about the work that they do differently. So I'm not saying the numbers don't matter, because they absolutely matter, but I think the process of going through all of this is so useful for people, because it helps them look at whatever it is they're studying in a different way.
Right. Yeah, just to clarify, I do think they're important. What I'm saying is that you have to handle them with care. Numbers, you have to handle numbers with care. That's what I'm saying.
1,000%.
Yeah. So let's talk about the difference between being a content marketer and a researcher. Would you say, I used to think that being a content marketer, kind of there's an overlap between being a content marketer and a researcher, but at the same time, the mindsets might pull you in different directions. So tell me how you see the relationship between marketers and content marketers and researchers.
Yeah. So when I hear the word research, I mean, I actually have a love-hate term with the word research too. Right. I mean, I think for some people, when you think content marketing research, they think, oh, this is the research that I need to do to figure out, you know, what keywords do I use for my SEO? You know, what type of things should I put into my article? Or you hear the word research and you think about, you know, traditional market research, trying to understand your buyers so you can better, you know, create content plans and editorial that's going to really support them. Or you can talk about research, and it can be survey-based research, or it can be research where you look at behavior data. So I think the term researcher is kind of broad, just like the term content marketer is kind of broad. But I think where the overlap is if you're doing this work meaningfully and thoughtfully, you're hopefully truly trying to understand that audience that you are trying to serve, and you're trying to figure out ways to serve them the best. I think just the way how you go about that, I think that's what differs. But I think that there's that overlap if you're truly audience focused. And I still think a lot of marketers are not truly audience focused. They're, you know, let's serve the brand more so than the people that the brand's trying to serve. But that said, I mean, I think in an ideal world, that's where the overlap is. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. How are they different, or how are they might clash with each other?
I think that content marketers in general, and again, in an ideal world, are really focused on all of the different ways that they can educate their prospects, their customers, anyone, you know, again, anyone who their brand serves. I think that the researchers, not to define a word with the same word, but they use research to get at that. So either, you know, research that they do to understand their audience, or research that they publish out. They were just a lot more focused in those efforts. Whereas I consider content marketers to be more generalists, because they can do, and they do a lot of different things. Like, you know, they're more focused on the writing and the types of formats and the planning and all of those different things. Whereas the researcher is focused more on the actual research process.
Okay, I'll give you my take and see if this resonates with you. I think there's like a fundamental tension between accuracy and meaning, which is present across professions and even within the same person, if the writers or something like that. So the more, I mean, you do want to present something that's meaningful, and you do want to present something that's accurate. But if you go to the extreme, I think researchers err on the side of accuracy, and content marketers err on the side of meaning. And if you go to the meaning, if you go to the more kind of compelling the story is, and the more, you know, it's an enjoyable story, the less likely it is to be accurate, and vice versa. If it's very accurate, then you might end up with just nothing to comprehend, because it's just all over the place. What do you think?
Yes, and I definitely see that tension too, and specifically with what I do too. It's interesting. I think a lot of people come at research from either we're going to have awesome, credible data, or we're going to have a really good story. And when I talk to people, it's because the way that I look at it is like, if you want to do good research, you need both of those things. That's kind of like the Venn diagram of where my sweet spot is. I feel like a lot of people are like, yes, like that's where I want to be, but I think it's hard to try to balance both of those.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that I'm perfect at it, but I think that's the sweet spot of where people are trying to get.
Right.
And that's the craft that I'm always trying to learn.
Right.
I think you're absolutely right.
Right. So let's think of someone who's not a researcher who would make a good researcher, or not a content market, Let's stick with the research. Someone who's not a researcher but would make a good researcher.
Like the type of qualities that person would have?
No, I mean a specific person in your mind. It's like, have you ever, maybe like one of your children is like, maybe they'd be a good researcher on the go, or something.
I think my husband would actually make a good researcher. He's a finance guy, but he likes to look at the world from a very critical perspective. And he likes to look at the world from multiple perspectives. So I think he would have a good balance of trying to figure out, you know, and he's always calling BS on things. So I think from that perspective, you know, I think that he would make a good, I think he has a really critical eye. So I think that he would do this job well, because he could see both sides, and you could be like, oh no, that's, you know, trying to really meet in the middle.
Right. Very interesting. Do you often talk about numbers and stuff because of the intersection between research and finance?
I mean, the things that we do are so very different. I mean, we met when we were getting our MBA. So I mean, we both enjoy this type of stuff, but we talk about it, but not like super in depth. Like I have a friend, and her husband is actually a statistician, and she does this type of work. So they have very much an overlap, because they like live in the exact same world.
Right. Okay. So how would you say the like, do you think his approach to numbers and these things, how is it colored by his finance background that is different from your background?
I mean, he's very much like numbers, and again, I like live in that intersection of like numbers plus story.
Right.
So I think from that perspective, it's very different. He's very much of a, like I said, he's more of a numbers guy.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So tell me an action that you took based on research data. that you either conducted or came across?
So I used to work for Joe Plitz. He used to work for CMI. And so, he does an annual study. So he's now shifted and he helps content entrepreneurs create these, businesses where they can, use content to, train and educate and so forth. And they do an annual report. And I know one of the things that they always find, and I think they found this in other times too, but really trying to focus on one platform, not trying to do all the things, really trying to focus and do one thing is a good thing. So even though I inherently know this, I think it's nice to see, I'm pretty sure his last study, like looked to see which platforms people are using. And I think it's a nice validation of it's okay not to be everywhere. It's okay to focus and try to be good at one thing. So for instance, go ahead.
You mean social media platforms or what kind of platforms?
Yeah, I mean, you don't need to blog and do Twitter and do Instagram and do LinkedIn and do all the things. You know what I mean? So I'm right now I'm very bullish on LinkedIn. That's where I think I have the most interesting conversations. That's where I feel like I can most consistently contribute. That's where I feel like I get most of my work from. So, even though I know that I should be blogging and doing all these other things, from a business perspective, I spend most of my time on LinkedIn. And it's nice to kind of know hey, that's okay. I don't have to be in all these places.
Okay, how do you take into account the idea of content repurposing or content distribution? There's a wave of that content, you should create, the idea is create once and distribute whatever. What do you think of that concept?
I think it's really smart. So it's funny because I was talking to some marketers yesterday and they had a lot of questions around repurposing.
Right.
So to me, repurposing can take a couple of forms. One, it is taking what you already have and either updating it and republishing and making it fresh again. If you have this big body of content, I think the other thing that you can do is that you can create or take assets you already have with the intention of, like you said, create once, publish everywhere, taking them and spinning them out into a bunch of different things. So I do think that I think marketers are tired. I think everyone just feels like this content overload. I feel like, so I do think it's a really smart approach. I think there's better ways to do it and not so great ways to do it. But, just coincidentally, I'm presenting. So this fall, I'm speaking at a couple of conferences, and the presentation I am presenting is all about how to create a year's worth of content from one research study. So it's all about this content repurposing angle, because I do feel like so many people are trying to wrap their heads around it and they know how to do it. They just don't know how to actually do it and what it actually looks like.
Right. I guess my question is about the idea of should you focus on one platform or kind of spread yourself through the platforms. So the kind of what the argument, I'm not saying that content distribution people are saying this, but the argument is or the idea is that if you've written this text already, then why not share the same text or post across LinkedIn, social, Facebook, Instagram, your blog, blah 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 blah.
And I totally hear that, and I think I probably could do more of that. So maybe that's kind of my bias. I think there's absolutely an argument that can be made for that. The other thing I always tell people is start with the platforms, where are you, and then repurpose into those platforms before trying to be every single place, because I think it's hard to keep up and I think it's hard to do well. So I personally have the mindset of let's say you are on LinkedIn and you have a newsletter and you have a blog or whatever those things are, focus all your repurposing efforts there. But if you're someone who wants to try all these different things and experiment on all these different channels, I don't think that that's at all wrong. And I don't even think that there is one. I mean, I've never seen studies, or I've never seen anecdotes to say this way is better than the other. So I think I'm a big believer of do what works for you. Don't try to like follow all the best practices, or don't try to follow everything that people tell you to do, but read, choose a path, take it, and see what works, and iterate from there. So I'm a believer of choose your formats. Doesn't need to be a lot. Do great work in those places.
All right.
What are your thoughts?
I'm kind of conflicted about this point, because my general preference is to stick with one. I mean, my general style is I want to stick with one platform place. But then again, it's like, but I already wrote the post. Like, why? It's just a click of a button, and it's other people will see it. But when I think of it, like, I don't know, I'm kind of like, I'm still on the fence about it. Currently, I'm like, my base is LinkedIn, and then
Okay.
I kind of reshare, or not reshare, just like post a bit on Facebook and Instagram. But yeah, I'm still not sure about what's the best strategy. But
Yeah.
yeah.
If you find data or you hear stories, let me know. I would actually love to see that.
Sure. Okay. Sure. Okay. So tell us a bit about survey fraud.
I'm saying survey what?
Fraud.
Oh, survey fraud. Yeah. I mean, I would say survey fraud is pretty prevalent. Like people. So when I'm talking about survey fraud, I'm specifically saying there's like, you send your survey out to get responses, and then the bad data that comes in. So I mean, in general, there's a few ways that you can get survey responses. One is working with a panel company. Excuse me. So you can work with companies like Cint or Sentiment or Rep Data or SurveyMonkey, and they'll help you source a panel that you can use to answer all your survey questions. I keep using the word love-hate. I have a love-hate relationship with panels. I feel like there is, I mean, from my experience, there is a significant amount of fraud that goes into those. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do as a survey writer to set up your survey so that you can try to spot fraud and then automatically disqualify people who aren't paying attention, who aren't who they say they are. So then that's something I always tell people to build into their surveys, and we go through different things you can build in so that your survey will kick out the bad data. You always need to include write-in questions, so you can read through people's write-in responses, because you're going to see gibberish. You're going to see people who don't understand what you're asking. Obviously, that's a sign that this person was not the right person to take your survey. So I think there's a lot of work that goes in to actually to setting up your survey correctly to weed out any fraud automatically, and then there's a lot of data cleaning on the back end to also weed out that fraud that got through. And the other way that you can get survey responses is to use your own list, or to partner with others who have a list of people you want to survey. And from my perspective, that works a bit better, because these people are more invested in the topic and they want those results back. So they'll spend more time thoughtfully answering questions. That said, I've done a lot of those surveys, and I've gotten spam in those, like links get out and bots answer surveys. And I don't want to say it's no harm, no foul. I mean, you got to go through and you have to clean all of that data, but you can definitely take care of that. But survey fraud definitely exists, and I don't think any marketer can take the survey data that they get and say, looks good, let's just analyze this. You really have to put in a process to try to weed out the bad data to begin with, and then clean it on the back end to make sure your data is as quality as possible.
So the bit that interests me is whether you use any of those techniques to weed out bad data or fraud in your personal life when you're interacting with people. Like, say, like, do you use any kind of those when somebody is talking to you personally? What kind of filters do you use to kind of detect lying? I mean, the answer might be I don't, but
yeah, I mean, if it's like personal stuff, it's very different to me than survey data. You know, for instance, in survey data, like a great question to ask because bots can't understand it is you could say, you know, which words, this came from Tony Cheever's this question, but he said like which words do you associate with family? You know, brother, mother, tree, and bots aren't, they can't think like that. So those are types of like, those are great questions to weed out bad respondents. But I don't know, my personal life, I feel like it's so much more one-to-one that I don't have that same type of detection, if you will. I have a lot, you know what I mean? Like you get those spam calls, you get all that stuff, and I just ignore them.
right.
But I'm not sure if that answers your question.
No, it's good. It's maybe because it's I'm kind of super obsessed with this idea of how can you detect people lying. So I'm just curious.
I mean,
and yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think about that on LinkedIn. Like I know LinkedIn bots exist. These people aren't even real people on LinkedIn.
Right.
You know. And one time someone showed me one of these people that, you know, I knew it was not real. And I'm like, I don't know how I would have sussed that out. I really have no idea. So
Right.
I don't know. It makes me uncomfortable, but I don't have a good solution for you.
Right. Okay. So my solution is to take Paul. There's a psychologist called Paul Ekman who specializes in body language. So apparently there's something called micro expressions. So you can, but this is I'm talking when somebody is speaking to you face to face. So apparently, like if you have, or not apparently, allegedly, I guess, if you can by training you can kind of detect those micro expressions in the face that are usually not visible to the naked eye, but if you train you can kind of detect them and they can give you signs whether the person is lying or not. I'd love to, you know, if I become a millionaire, I'm gonna take the certificate is pretty expensive. So if I'm gonna, it's when people ask me what do you want to do if you have $1 million, this is one of the first thing I want to do. I want to take the certificate. But yeah, that would be my thought.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I think the world needs more of that because I don't think people can tell anymore.
Right, exactly. All right, so let's move to a bit of more random stuff. I mean, feel free to talk more about research if any of the questions kind of trigger you to talk about research. But yeah, so if you were handcuffed for a month, what would you do?
If I was handcuffed for a month?
Yeah.
Like, how would I try to get out of it, or how would I live my life?
Yeah, I mean, how would you live your life? Yeah, not. I'm interested. Like, how would you make use of it of your time?
I mean, so can I use my hands? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, I guess I couldn't. And like, I'm trying to think like, how do I drink and how do I, you know, like sustain life? How do I think I'm going the wrong direction here.
Whatever direction you want to take it.
Okay, no, I was just thinking, I mean, obviously I would need to find help so I could sustain life. First of all, is what I would do to figure out, you know, how I can drink and eat. And I mean, if I had a lot of time, I mean, I think I would spend a lot of time. I would love to spend, I guess if I'm just thinking, so I guess if I had limited use of where I could go and what I could do, I would probably read. I would probably try to work on lower body strength because that's not handcuffed.
Right.
I would try to, there's a lot of things about my business that I've been thinking about that I just need dedicated space to think about. I think I would spend a lot of time thinking about all of those things and how I can evolve my business.
Right.
Yeah, it'd be a lot of thinking and reading and hopefully some exercising of what I could do.
Right. Sounds good. That reminds one of the people I asked told me he'd played soccer, which is football, because he was a kid. He was like 10 years old. So I really like his answers. Like I like your answers, obviously. You know what I'm saying?
That's a good answer.
Yeah. Okay, so if you had the choice, not the choice, would you rather go deaf, blind, or dumb?
Deaf.
Okay.
Because I mean, I love the sound of, all the things, I'm such a mom, but like, I love the sound of my kids laughing, or I love the sound of like, all the things, but I think I would miss sight more. And I think that sometimes, as I talked about earlier, I yearn for more quiet sometimes. So it would be really hard, but in a weird way. I think it would also be this weird blessing where you have to tune out all of these things. So I think your life just becomes more focused.
Oh, I like that. Oh, I like that. I like that a lot. Okay. So, what is something that would radically improve your life?
I think that if I had someone to come into my house and be my personal chef, like cooking like really healthy meals for myself and my family, I think that would dramatically change my life. I feel like I'm always trying, like, as as you're working and doing all the things, that is the thing I sometimes feel the most guilty about, is if I don't meal prep and have healthy foods for myself and my family, that is like my biggest tension, which only says that I'm a very, very lucky person to have that be my biggest tension. Don't get me wrong. Like
Right.
I love my life, and I wouldn't actually change a lot about it. But if I could have
Right.
someone create healthy, beautiful meals,
Interesting. Have you looked into
pack
these
my
kind
kids'
of
lunches.
these like plans or subscriptions where like you can subscribe to a plan and they'd send you food every day or something like that? I don't.
I've
Yeah.
I've seen that kind of stuff, but then I'm like, you still have to make it, or I can certainly like feed myself relatively well, but then I want my kids to eat I want my kids to
Right.
eat healthy. It's just this I think if you want to live your best life, you need to be feeding your body with the best things so you have the most energy and clarity and focus.
Right.
I think a lot of it starts there. So
Right.
I would love I don't know. I feel like that would transform my life.
No, it's an interesting answer. Okay, so think of someone you know very well, and then someone you know well, but not, yeah, I mean, medium well.
Okay.
Uh, do you have the first person in mind?
Like one, like she's like a work colleague that popped to my mind.
Right. I want to
Okay.
think of words that they use a lot. Can you identify words that are typical of these two people or whatever number of people you're thinking of?
Yes. I mean, she's very like irreverent and like she's got a little feisty, a little down to earth and approachable, but just like fun. And she has one of those ways of speaking that's very, like, oh, I want to have like the words that, would obviously flow out of my mouth, which obviously aren't right now. But like she just has a really good way of communicating that's this mix of like I said, like irreverent and fun, but smart.
Do you remember any specific words? Is this the person that's very close to you or the medium close?
No, she's someone I know, but
Right.
we're not
Okay.
super close. And it's so funny because yesterday she was using words to describe herself that I read. I'm like, oh, I love those words, but I can't recall what those words are. It was
Right.
like, yeah.
What I'm saying is, what I'm curious about is words that they usually use in the conversation.
Oh, what
That
words
is,
they use in
yeah,
conversation.
they typically use.
Oh my gosh. That's a really good question. And I'm almost feeling like, this is a tangent, but I feel like I'm the person who remembers how I felt about a conversation or remember the outcome of the conversation. I don't remember the specific words of a conversation.
Right.
So I'm having a really hard time with this question because yeah, I don't know what those words are.
Right. Because the reason I'm asking is that I'm someone who's very word obsessed and word oriented, and I pay a lot of attention to what words people use. Um, I've been talking to, and I've been thinking about like what words does my mother use and what words does my brother use and things of that sort. And something I found interesting that you think that the people I spend the most time with, it would be easier for me to come up with words with those kind of distinctive words, but that's actually not the case. Like some people, like I was able to, you know, identify words for my cousin before my mother, but I spent way more time
Interesting.
talking to my mother than my cousin. So I was just kind of like thinking about this a lot. It's
Like like I was thinking about like my kids and my kids have like, you know, my kids are 10 and 14, so they have that vernacular of like young kids, but like my husband, I'm like, what words does he use? We obviously talk all the time.
right.
You know, it's
Exactly.
interesting. Like I'm like, what words would define him? I don't know. Now
Yeah.
I'm going to notice, and I could answer that question, you know, in a couple days from now. But
Right. But isn't this interesting that it doesn't jump out readily, even though like you spent like you spent thousands and thousands of hours with him talking. It doesn't come
yeah,
readily easily. It's like okay, you have to think about it, and even even me, and like yeah, it's interesting. Okay, when you notice, tell me again. I'd be interested
I
in
definitely
how.
will.
Okay, sure. I get really excited about these kind of things.
That's fun because I
Yeah,
never thought about that before.
right,
It's a fun conversation. So I'm like, oh yeah, yeah. I mean,
right.
I imagine I'll be looking at the world differently after we're done with our conversation today.
That's my purpose.
So I appreciate it.
Yeah, that's my purpose. Okay, so tell me something that confuses you.
I'm confused why these days everyone is so set on proving what they believe instead of trying to interact with curiosity. I don't that really confuses me. I don't know. I don't know why the world is so divisive. I mean, I obviously know why the world's divisive, but I'm just like, I feel like why now? Why is it so hard? Like, I feel like the older I get, the more difficult communication is. And I feel like, yeah, I'm just confused why communication just feels extra hard these days.
You mean personally or like on a cultural level?
Both.
Both.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like communication on a personal level is almost harder because I feel like I have a lot of conversations about like, you know, I say something and then people misinterpret it. I'm like, well, I actually was trying to say this. I feel like that's happening more often. But on a cultural level, I also feel like there's just a lot more there's not an openness of ideas. There's just not like even people who say they're open, they're still just trying to always prove what they're trying to say. So I'm just confused why communication both globally and locally is so hard.
What hypotheses have come to your mind? Hypotheses.
Um, I think that like from a large perspective, I think social media, the algorithms, I think people are continually fed what they're fed. I think that people don't go outside of themselves to really try to connect with others who are different and truly try to learn and understand. I feel like, especially when we all just got so insular, and even if we had a little circle, the circle was still pretty small, and it was still pretty people of our choosing, and we often just surround ourselves with people who are like ourselves. So I think that it just feeds on each other. And I think personally, I think it's hard because I have a daughter who's 14. So I think teenagers are like, you know, my daughter's always saying to me, Mom, like, why are you mad at me? And I'm like, I'm not mad at you. I'm just talking. I think there's just that, because that's just the age. And my husband, he shifted from working in an office to working from home, and he still hasn't gone back. And as much as I love having him here, I think it's just a lot of togetherness. So I think it's just like you almost, I don't know. That's a lot of different hypotheses, but
Right.
something's just fundamentally shifted, I feel like.
Okay. What has been the most effective way of conveying your own personal message when this miscommunication happens, or on a cultural level? What do you think? What strikes you as like, oh, that technique works to kind of like let people understand what they're talking, to let people communicate rather than shout at each other?
I mean, I think like on a really personal level, like I've noticed with my kids, this is going to sound almost crazy, but almost sometimes just putting things in a list or writing things down for them is almost better than trying to tell them something. Or a lot of times it is, like you mentioned, I didn't work much this summer, took a sabbatical-ish, and it was letting my kids talk to me when they wanted to talk to me, not when I wanted to talk to them. I think that opens communication a lot, is just having communication on other people's terms. On a bigger scale, I think it's really trying, like my favorite people are those people who really want to have conversations and learn, and I can say something without fear of saying something wrong. Like I can stumble through it, and they'll listen to my intent and say, well, you said it like this, you must mean this. Like I don't have a lot of time for that in my life at this point, which is also terrible. But for me, it's just trying to really create stronger bonds with people that I can have open and frank and good communication with, even if we don't see eye to eye. And I think a lot of it's just trying to connect with people who are just different than yourselves, and just trying to, I don't know how to fix the problem globally, but I'm just really trying to learn from people who aren't like me. So I don't know. Do you have any good solutions?
Yes. I think, I mean, this is one of my favorite topics, how people change their minds, basically, and how can you encourage a culture of openness. I think one of the best ways is to try, and this even works in debates and intellectual stuff, to try as much as possible to agree with your intellectual rival, and it kind of like disarms them when they see you kind of agreeing with them. It kind of disarms them, and it shifts the vibe and tone of the conversation till you reach this point where like you're seeing the common denominators, and then try to see where you can go from there. So I would say one of the best ways is to try to agree as much. And I'm not saying like pretend to agree. I'm saying actually see like, okay, what do we agree upon? And then let's use this as a base to talk about the things that we disagree upon.
I like that. And it's probably not, yes, you're right on this, but I mean, it's like, you're right on this. Yes.
Yes.
Period.
Yes.
The end. You know.
So I think they should do a lot of, or to encourage this attitude, there's a lot of acknowledgement that has to be done. Like, oh yes, you have a good point there, you have a good point there. And then maybe at the end, when once you establish like, but actually this point I disagree, blah, blah, blah. That's one part. Another thing is, I really, really think that that's more on the cultural side. Relationships are very important. Like, let's say with the issue of the racism, right? As long, I'm gonna makeup races, the green race and the purple race, right? You can talk intellectually as much as you want, but there's always this barrier. And this, once you establish kind of good relationships on a personal level between them, then it becomes more acceptable to kind of change your intellectual, your mind intellectually. So I think that's another factor.
100%, because so many people talk in like data, or they talk in like, you know, and I'm like, sit down and I'm like, have you actually had a conversation with someone who's different than you about
Right.
these things? And most people haven't.
Right, right.
So that's I love that.
And sorry, this is, and I'm talking way too much, but I'm getting just answers. One of the psychological experiments that they've done on this, which is how do you get people to get along with each other when they're not getting along. One of the best ways is for them, both of them, to work on a common problem. So, and they did this experiment on kids. When you put them together and there's one goal that they share that they need to address, it's a good bonding technique. Anyways,
That's
sorry,
good. I like that.
I talked way too much, but you asked me.
No, that's interesting.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about kids. What are your thoughts on homeschooling? Have you ever considered it?
I have not considered it. I don't think I would be great at homeschooling.
Okay.
I also think you have to, again, I think to do that well, you have to make that a priority, and then you got to deprioritize other things.
Right.
I know people it works really well for, and
Okay.
I also have very I don't want to say typical kids. Like I know I have friends whose kids just don't fall in that norm, whatever that norm is. And so I can completely understand why they homeschool kids. But yeah, that hasn't been something that I've ever considered.
Okay, let's assume that for the next year you're gonna homeschool your kids.
Okay.
What kind of things what will you do? Are there any specific topics, techniques? Just kind of like go wild.
I mean, I would love, like, for instance, like we just talked about, I would love to explore with the kids, like how you can, find the common ground with people who you don't see eye to eye with. I would love to explore how do you ferret out the fake news, and how do you figure out like what's actually true and what's not true, and how can you do really like how can you be a good digital citizen? Like that's kind of a weird one, but you know what I mean? Like how do you
Yeah.
actually learn and find real information? I would love I'm not a fan of social media.
Right.
We've been very like no on social media. We let my 14-year-old just get something recently, and I'm not sure if that was the right decision. I would love to like have them learn about the impact of social media on your brain and how it, all of that. So I would love to explore topics that I think are going to help them be better people and kinder people and better citizens. And I think a lot of it would be through, I would love it to be like an experiential homeschool where you go and you do things and you talk to other people and you learn and you connect in different ways than you wouldn't otherwise.
Right.
And I would love to travel and do different things too that we can't do during the school year per se, and just like experience the world and different cultures and different people.
Right. So let's assume that you are the Secretary of Education. Would you do what kind of so not first question, what would you do differently? And yeah, that's basically the question.
So when I look at the Secretary of Education, I consider that from a federal perspective. And I'll be completely honest, I get confused at what purview the federal Secretary of Education has versus the state versus the county versus the school board. So I don't know. even as a parent, and I go to all the stuff. I don't even know who does what.
Okay, let's assume you have absolute authority for everything in the educational system. What would you do differently?
I think it would depend on what the ages are, but I would love for schools to adapt so they can help kids who learn differently. I feel like so much of what's taught right now is like, if you're the kid who can sit and you're the kid who can, follow all these steps. I feel like our educational system is too cookie cutter, and it doesn't adapt as kids need them to adapt. And I would also make sure that schools are talking about things that are very practical. Like, it's great that my kids know how to do, my elder knows how to do algebra, but she's not taught how to, balance her checkbook. She's not taught, if she takes out a loan, what that means for her life. She's not, she doesn't have financial literacy that comes from us. She's not taught, they're not taught how to be sustainable adults. Obviously the stuff at home we're going to teach, but all the things, there's just, I think sometimes it's too focused on theory and what kids have learned in the past, but not like, what do kids actually need to know to be good citizens moving forward? Like the digital citizenship and how do you tell fake news from not? How do you, I feel like we need more, I hate to say real world curriculum, but I feel like we need more real world curriculum and things like mental health and how to look out for others and all of those things that I just think they don't focus on enough. Or if they do, they focus it on in this like goofy, hokey way. The kids like dismiss it.
Right. Okay, so let's combine parenting and research. How are you one of those parents who kind of like reads a lot of parenting books and check the latest about parenting research and all of that stuff? And what would be tell me something that the books say but didn't work in real life. You try to apply the books and it didn't work in real life, and the opposite, something that actually worked from the books. So many questions.
So I feel like when my kids were little, I read the books. You know what I mean? Like how do you get them, to do all the things. My kids were not good sleepers, so those sleep books did not work for me. Like I really, really wanted my kids to sleep because I like quiet. That did not work for me. And then your other question was what's something that has worked for me?
Yes, from the books or from the research.
I feel like now I read more. There's a few, I don't like Facebook that much, but there are a few like parenting groups that I follow on Facebook where people are asking questions of how to deal with stuff with their middle schooler, or there's other groups about, social media and things like that with teens. And I feel like I learn a lot of little aha moments from there, just of how to like, I feel like I've just like ingrained some things with what we do. But like, for instance, that idea with lists, you know what I mean? Like if your child don't tell your kid to do these 5 things, write down these 5 things that your kids need to do. And I feel like that works a lot better than having that conversation. So I know I picked that up from online somewhere. I just can't remember where.
Right. Isn't it interesting that it depends again? I mean, this observation will depend on what's the source of this information, but it's from what you said, it seems to me that what was more helpful. Well, it's too okay. I'm gonna say it without just stopping myself. The Facebook groups were in some way more helpful than the books. Would that be accurate?
I don't even know if it's so much more accurate as I feel like when they were little, I felt like I had to read the books. I feel like that's what you do and you're a good parent. You read the books, you do all the things. And I feel like I probably have shorter blocks of time and technology has just probably changed.
Right.
So I'm not sure if the books weren't so much accurate as I just, you need to read something about, you know what I mean? Like you can, like, I always like joked, like this was like, we talked about this when I used to run editorial. Like if you have a baby, you can talk about what happens when a kid turns 4, but you don't care because you can only care what's happening with your baby. Don't tell me how to buy like a toddler bed. I'm trying to figure out how to buy this crib. So I think that it's just, sometimes the books cover so much. And I think sometimes now I just try to find things that are more specific to my circumstances. So it just seems more like, okay, this is gonna work for me right now. Or otherwise I might have read good books, but if I wasn't there, it's harder to apply because I forget to apply it if it's something that's going to happen down the line.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about motherly love. This is such a very strong type of love, but why do you? I mean, I'm gonna say an observation and tell me if you agree. It gets way less coverage in pop culture, like let's say songs or movies or books or novels, than romantic love. So the first question is, do you agree? And the second question, why is this the case?
I think yes, it does get a lot less, airplay. And 2, I think there's a lot of kids out there who don't have the right motherly love, but let's assume that kids do. It's just this assumed thing. Like, I hope that I assume my kids know, like, no matter what, I have their back. I love them. I support them. It's an unconditional love. I might not agree with what they do, but I mean, I love them, so there's not much to say because it's just like, this is a constant. Where romantic love, you have, interest and then you fall in love and you know what I mean? Like, there's like so much more of a story, whereas like motherly love is like this, as the person who's actually experiencing that. So I think there's just more of a story with romantic love than with motherly love.
Ooh, this is very interesting. Yeah, that's a very good way to think about it.
And I think that my kids probably take it for granted, where they don't take that love story for granted because it's never happened to them yet because they're too young.
But at the same time, there isn't like this. You can still like love from the mother's perspective, like love how a mom loves her kids and like the love that she feels when the kid is born and all of that stuff. For me, like okay, here's what the clash I'm feeling. I feel like in real life, motherly love is much more, I wouldn't say successful.
Static?
No, like it has a lower failure percentage than romantic love, and it's stronger in the sense that not more intense, but like more kind of grounded, and it's more meaningful than romantic love. But romantic love gets all the songs and all the movies. So yeah, it's kind of like, why is that?
Yeah, and it's a really good question.
I mean,
I guess
if ask any mother, most mothers would say that they love their kids more than they love their husband or their romantic their significant other. Why don't they get songs? It's I don't know. I find it very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you love your kids differently than you love your husband. Like I love my kids fiercely, like in a protective way. I feel like I want to make my kids, like, I feel like I need to give them all the tools that they can have to become good, productive, kind citizens. Like, I'm trying to teach them. I'm not trying to change my husband. Right. You know what I mean? Like, hopefully we both make each other the best versions of ourselves, but I'm not trying to mold him into something. Not even that I'm trying to mold my kids, but it's just a very different, it's just very different.
Right.
But I think one of the best things you can give to kids is a strong marriage. Right. So I think you shouldn't put that romantic love aside just to focus on your kids.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I'm gonna mull over this
it's interesting.
Yeah.
But I think it's far more heartbreaking for a kid who doesn't have a mother's love. Like that breaks my heart.
Right. Yeah.
Kids who don't have that.
Yeah. Alrighty. Okay, speaking of words, you know how people say in social media, I'm humbled that I was awarded this, I'm humbled that blah, 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 blah. It's always confused me, like, why would you use the word humble? Like it's exactly the opposite. It's the opposite of what you want to convey, or like you want to brag, but it's, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I wonder if it's like this, like, I wonder if it's just people's tendency to be self-deprecating, or like almost like, oh, you know, little old me, or you know what I'm saying, or oh, I don't deserve it. And I almost even wonder, like, in a weird way, if it's almost like, so people almost say, oh no, you're awesome. You know, if you say I humbly, or you know, I don't know. Or
Okay.
maybe it's just how we're taught to speak.
Right. Yeah, because it's interesting. I was always thinking about this, and then finally I saw like an article by mistake, that by accident, that was talking about this. Like it was like a parody. Like why do people do that? Like they it's humble bragging. But in any case, let's move to the community questions, and because I'm doing some research on online communities, so. I'd be interested in knowing, like, what kind of what are some memorable or noteworthy online communities you're part of?
So this is a nut I'm trying to crack myself. So this is really interesting to me. I feel like communities are so very valuable, but I feel like personally, I've had more success with in person, and I've had more success with almost organic people who come together and like we exist via email or exist via something else. Okay, here's an example. So earlier this year, here's an online community I actually think does work really well. I was doing this clean eating challenge. I wanted to reset and, you know, figure out how can I eat better and for more energy and focus and all these things. And so this person, it's called Clean Food Crush, and she has this Facebook group. And again, I don't like Facebook, but apparently I like some of the Facebook groups. And I think this is a really good online community, because not only is it something that, you know, she shares all these different things to do, but everyone, like, she talks about things like non-scale victories. You know, people think healthy eating equals weight, but she talks about, you know, it's all these things like you feel more focused and you're proud of yourself, or, you know, if you're trying to meet certain medical, you know, numbers that are, you know, whatever. And so I love that she celebrates people for who they are, where they are. And I love that, and so does everyone else. Like, it's a very positive community. And like, people will be like, hey, I fell off the wagon. I'm trying to come back on. And there's just support and there's no judgment. So I think that communities where people can show up and just be them, and just be like, hey, this is my imperfect self, or hey, I need help, and people chime in. I think that's really helpful.
Okay. So what would make you pay to join an online community? If there's a paid online community, is there a certain thing that would kind of tip you over?
I think that it would have to be really relevant. I hate to say relevant, valuable content, because those feel like very throwaway words. But I think it would depend on the content, and I think it would depend on the other members. Like, I love to be surrounded with people who are supportive. I love to be surrounded with people who make me accountable. I think it's oftentimes too, I think the closer connected you are with those people in terms of goals and interests, I think that's helpful too. So if there were a lot of people, like right now, one of the things I'm trying to do is build like a coaching and course coaching and courses. So if I could connect with others who are on the same stage as I am, doing the same type of work for marketers, like that would be super helpful to me. And I would definitely pay for that.
Right. Okay, so last question. Okay, last two questions before you ask me a question. So do you think I am more creative or analytical or in between? I mean,
do I think that you are?
Yes, yeah.
I think you meet in the middle. Because I mean, at least from our brief conversation, I feel like
yes. You can speculate as much as you.
I feel like I think that you're analytical, that you look at all this data and you try to make sense of it, but then the way you make sense of it, you do so in a really creative way. So I feel like you're a good mix of both.
Correct. Yeah.
What would you say?
Yeah, I think I'm definitely a mixture of both, and I find that I need both of these aspects in my life. Like I can't be all the time just talking about numbers and data, and I can't be all the time just like telling stories. Like I have to be. Both of them are very important to me.
Yes.
I like what somebody I met. I love what she told me. She told me like, I thought the creative side is the crazy part. So she told me like, I thought you were, I knew that you were crazy and all of that stuff, but I discovered that you are crazy with in a what's the word that you used? Crazy, and I'm trying to translate. In a studied way. You're crazy in a studied way, in a calculated way. Yes.
I get the same impression. Like you seem very introspective, but you seem like you take that introspection, you do like,
play with
fun,
it.
wacky things with it.
Yes, yeah. So yeah. And the last question is, how do you think we are similar and different? Obviously, you can speculate because we just met for this was the first time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're both thoughtful. I mean, not thoughtful. I think we're both introspective. I just used that word. I mean, I think we're both we truly are trying to figure things out in a way that's going to make our worlds better, the worlds around the people around us better. I think that's how we're very similar. I think that we are different. I bet that I probably overthink more than you do. I wouldn't call myself a perfectionist, but I would call myself an overthinker. And sometimes I have to get out of my analysis paralysis. And I feel like you are probably more likely to take quick action.
No, we're same. I'm super,
okay.
Yeah, I'm super
okay.
Like analysis paralysis is one of my biggest things. But yeah.
Let's see. Okay, then a different way that we're different. I mean, we're obviously in different life stages where you the ability to like live where you want to live, and I'm a lot more. I mean, that's just I'm that's a good question. We different. I mean, there's got to be 1,000 ways that we're different. I don't know why it's not like popping through my mind. Well, what would you say?
I would say the role thing, like being a mother. For me, it's such a terrifying responsibility that I would just like I'm in awe. Like I find it too intimidating. So I guess this is it. Like I don't like to be in charge of other people, where you just by the fact that you're a mother and how you talk about your kids, it seems like you have this responsibility. So yeah, that would be one of the biggest things.
And they're 10 and 14. We've had a lot of growing pains along the way. We've had a lot of stress along the way. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's really hard.
Yeah. So yeah, now you can ask me a question.
I'm actually curious, and tell me if this is too circular of a question, but what is your favorite question that a guest has ever asked you?
I like this question. What is the favorite? Ooh, okay. This one was asked by Daniel Bennett, and he
Okay.
asked it. He asked it to his guest as well, which is what is a which again I'm going circular as well. What is a question that you'd like to be asked?
Hmm.
And I find this very, because I'm someone who obviously loves questions, a very powerful question, and a question that we should ask each other more often. And it can unlock a lot of, yeah, and it can unlock a lot.
So I'm sorry. So what question do you wish you were asked more often? What did you tell him?
Not more often. What question would you like to be asked?
Oh, I'm sorry. What question would you like to be asked? What was your response?
This I don't remember if this was my response, but one of my favorite things to be asked is, how did you find this? Or so my brand is the finding hidden gems, and I enjoy finding things that other people find valuable and that they didn't come across. And I've been so when somebody like I share somebody with I share something with somebody, an article or whatever, and the response is like, "Oh my God, I how come I didn't see this before? This is amazing. How come? Where did you find this?" Or something along these lines. I feel very, it gives me a kick.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
So yeah, that's my answer. All
Good
right,
answer. Well, this was
Michele.
fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time, and hopefully you can keep in touch with each other. And yeah, do you have any?
Definitely. Yeah, I look forward to staying in touch, and yeah, thank you for helping me think differently today. It starts my day
Right.
off in a good path.
That's what I do. Anytime you need to change to think differently, just send me a message.
I will. Give me a question
Right.
today, and I'll think differently. So.
Right. I'm gonna stop recording.